Thank you for tuning in to the ICA Health and Wellness Committee's book talk. I am here with co-author of the book, Making Music with a Hearing Loss. This is Wendy Cheng. Hi, Wendy. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We hear a lot of discussion about hearing protection and about avoiding hearing loss, but we don't hear hardly anything about what to do once you've incurred a hearing damage. And I read this book over the summer, and I love that this book starts out with just a whole lot of practical knowledge. It's just so well thought out. It predicts questions that people faced with a potential hearing loss might have. And so the first question that I have for you about your book is, what prompted you to take on this kind of project?
Well, this what you're holding in your hand is a second edition. When we started the book, oh, it was way back in 2000 and something. And for the first edition, one of the audiologists on our board, uh, this suggested the idea of creating a book that would answer a lot of questions people have. And I said, okay, that sounds great. It sounds like a great idea. And so we decided, okay, we're going to focus on hearing aids, and we're going to focus on, we're also going to have a section where people could send in their stories, because I think personal stories is one way of getting across to an audience that their people might have different ways of coping with hearing loss. So, so I thought that's what the book needed to have. But when we started our second edition of the book, we decided we need to expand it to include cochlear implant, because we're getting quite a few cochlear implant musicians joining our group. So that's how you went. And that's why we also decided, I don't want us to sound that we're American-centric, even though we're based in the United States. We want to explain that this issue of coping with hearing loss as a musician is universal. It's not just happening in America. It can also happen for other part of the world. But and I thought it was important that we had the perspective beyond the borders of the United States, which is why we have some international people who share their own stories. So anyway, so that's how this book got started.
That's great.
Yeah.
So can you tell me a little bit about your story that's in this book?
Yeah. My story is unusual because I decided to break some attitudinal barriers about what it means to have a significant hearing loss as a child, and how to get beyond wanting to study more than a keyboard instrument. I mean, when you're hard of hearing, people automatically expect, oh yeah, you'll do fine on the piano. It's not pitch bass. You're gonna do fine, okay? But and my mother loves the piano, so yeah, she insisted all three girls in her family learn piano. It's just that, I grew up in a public school, and I saw people trying out for a band. We didn't have an orchestra at that time, but they were trying out for a band. But they also want people in band to have some sort of musical aptitude, so they made you take a musical aptitude test. My hearing was good enough in my left ear that time, though I passed the test with flying colors. But I didn't know what to do about the fact that, throughout my grade school, all my teachers walked around the classroom, and I always
Yeah.
got very nervous when they walked away from me. And I thought maybe band is like that. Boy, it turns out band wasn't like that, but I didn't know that at that time. Okay,
Not
so,
with so many kids
but
in
anyway,
them.
but my point is, to have a hearing loss in childhood, and then to want to, and because you're musically inclined and you want to expand further from keyboard instruments, So I would say I fell in love with orchestral strings in high school. But at that time, the attitude around me was, oh, don't bother learning string instrument. It's going to be too hard. It's intonation based. So it wasn't until I got into college that I started working my way around the mysterious things about intonation, because I didn't really understand what it was. I had to have a visual representation of what good intonation was before I fully understand what I was missing. And so I use my tuner app a lot. It's a very visual tuner app, and it has colors to tell you when you're in tune and when you're not in tune. So
Mhm.
that helps me a great deal to visualize what it means to hear in tune when I'm practicing by myself. But I like to think that yes, I lost my hearing as a child. It will be different from people who lose their hearing as an adult, but over the course of the hearing journey, many experiences will become more or less similar to people who lose their hearing in adulthood. It's just when you are losing your hearing as an adult, I think the sense of grief is so much more, because it's
You've had it.
you've lived with music.
Yeah.
You live with music for most of your life, and so not hearing well is very disconcerting for a lot of people. And I think for me, because I've lived with hearing loss for most of my life, I'm not grieving so much as I'm trying to resolve problems.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I understand people who lose their hearing later in life, they usually have a long grieving process, and some might be in denial as well. But it
Mm-hmm.
happens.
Well, so then, in your experience, what do you think most people misunderstand about hearing
Okay.
loss?
I think one of the most common misconception about hearing devices is that they will cure hearing loss.
Oh,
But hearing devices are not magical solutions. When we talk about hearing devices here, I'm talking about hearing aid, I'm talking about cochlear implants, I'm talking about bone anchor implants, I'm talking about auditory brainstem implants, these type of things. They have many limitations, and the most common limitation is they cannot resolve issues of hearing and noise, and they also have limited range. Once anyone is standing more than 5 feet away from me, I start getting nervous. I won't hear them well.
okay.
So, and so I think that's one of the most common misconceptions people have regarding hearing devices.
Is
I would like people to think of it like in the same way people think about wheelchairs, because yes, wheelchairs help you get around. But in order to take full advantages of the mobility that wheelchair brings, you also need buildings that have ramps. You need buildings that have elevators. So these are the kind of things that, broaden the horizon of someone with mobility impairment. And I know you haven't asked me this yet, but I kind of want to segue into it because it ties in with what I wanted to say. What I was going to say is about if I had to redo this book over, I probably would keep everything, but I would add a chapter on explaining how assistive listening devices can be used for ensemble situations. If you play in a musical ensemble, you find yourself sitting in the back of the ensemble, even in the middle of the ensemble, most hearing aids and cochlear implants are just going to amplify the acoustic of the room or the background noise. It will be difficult, if not impossible, to hear both the conductor or the musical note in your section. So
okay.
that's why it becomes important that you learn about assistive listening devices, because they both solve the problem of hearing in noise and hearing across great distances.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting point because man, those cochlear implants sure do seem magical. Like it seems like such a brilliant brilliant piece of
Yes.
technology and that it still has its limitations is a good point to bring up. But that doesn't mean that they wouldn't be helpful if you were a good candidate for them.
Yeah, I mean, if you were a good candidate, people should actually consider it because, when I lost the remainder of my hearing, I had to deal with 7 months of silence. I didn't handle it very well.
Oh,
And so, yeah, and I thought I missed my music too much. That was one of the
mm,
impetus. Well, not the only impetus, but one of the impetus for me to get my first cochlear implant.
yeah. Yeah, and I know there are multiple studies out on not just the on the like social emotional effect of losing your hearing, like what kind of impact that has on us, and also cognitively, what kind of impact that can have on us if we have our hearing gone for too long. So, what was there anything that surprised you as you were working on this project?
Well, I think one of the most surprising things was the variety of ways musicians coped with losing their hearing.
Oh, like hearing
Some
from
of them,
all the
it
different
doesn't
stories.
matter. Yeah. Some of them, yeah, different stories. Some of them, they were fortunate enough to work with an understanding audiologist who understood music and hearing loss. Like if you read that story from the cellist in Austria, and so that was one. But there are other people who has chosen to focus on the particular characteristic of an instrument so they can keep making music. Like the lady who plays not just any old clarinet, she chooses bass clarinet because it was her preferred frequency range. So
Hmm.
these are the kind of thing that people would have to use to change to keep working on their musical journey despite the hearing loss.
Yeah. Yeah, because like you mentioned that the hearing, the assistive devices can have limits in range. And so for whatever reason, for her, she
Yeah,
just discovered that bass clarinets.
yeah. I'm talking about range. When I say range, I have two meanings. There's a range of how far somebody could be standing from you, and
Oh,
then there's
okay.
the range of frequency range. So when we trying to marry a hearing device with a musical instrument, sometimes it's difficult because most hearing devices work in the frequency of speech and not the frequencies of music, which is much wider.
Right.
Okay, and so yeah, so like I said, so different people have different ways of working around it. I, for example, switched from violin to viola because the viola had frequency range suited me better. So these are it was a little bit lower, and the thing about the violin is once you get onto the high E string, everything in the higher position sounded tinny, and I just thought, no, I need to have I needed to switch go down a little bit lower, because I did. But the thing is, also it also has something to do with how far you want to go in an instrument. Like I was, so I started with violin. I got the first position, third position, but then I realized if I wanted to advance any further in fifth position or more, then I need to change instrument. And so that's what I'm doing now. I had this wonderful teacher who's having me learn seventh position at this moment. So I just try not to freak out, but taking it. Okay. He
Um,
also made me take out all the tapes on the fingerboard. So
I'll-
I like how I'll take it out. He made me take them out. So uh,
Yeah, I remember methods class finding those tapes exceptionally useful. So on the topic of teaching then, I myself have a woodwind student. She's little middle schooler who has been in hearing aids for years already. What advice do you have for those of us teaching either students with hearing loss or even with maybe suspected hearing loss?
well, um, I think a lot of it also depends on several things, and some people, even as young as they might be, they might not want to call attention to their hearing loss. I was one of those. I didn't learn about assistive listening devices myself until my last year of high school. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, I didn't learn about it until my last year of high school. So I started freshman year in college, learn using assistive listening devices to get through college lectures. And I didn't care. I was the only person, and I might be sitting in the first row in a huge auditorium, and I will give my transmitter to the teacher, and I'll be wearing the receiver unit. And but I didn't care about being self-conscious because I was focused on my studies. I didn't, and it never occurred to me to ask for a note taker. I could have asked for a note taker if I really wanted to, but I was so used to taking my own notes that So my point is, when you are teaching a student with hearing loss, um, you might find that you can't talk and expect them to play while you're talking, because sometimes when a student is playing, their teacher will correct them while they're talking, and you can't do that. I remember my viola teacher. She tried to do that. She tried to do that while I was playing, and then at one time I realized, oh my God, I was hearing her clearly through the assistive listening device she was wearing. I was trying not to burst into tears because I had not been able to hear two sound sources simultaneously, until then. It was always practice and then listen to the teacher. It was like you do one thing and then you do another thing. But being able to use assistive listening devices made I think it made it easier on my instructor, because they know they could just talk freely. Then I might have trouble hearing them occasionally. But if you have an instructor who's very verbal, who's so used to giving correction while the student is playing,
While they're
they
playing,
might
yeah.
have issues with that. You might also want to, for someone who is new to band or orchestral instrument, you might have to explain what intonation is, because it was not a concept I didn't really understand. I was coming from a keyboard background. Nobody really explained what intonation was, but I thought it was a big secret, because all the instructors, the string instructor, told me, said, "Oh, if you have good intonation, you'll do fine playing a string instrument." But intonation was this very mysterious thing that seemed to be like the holy grail.
Mhm.
like, so you might have to explain what intonation is. Rhythm is easier, but intonation, oh my God. I spent a lot of time trying not to worry about it, and trying to just do the best I could.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Well,
so
and like you said earlier, you had maybe also in tandem with that is to use very visual guides to help with intonation,
yeah,
like as you are
yes,
teaching the concept and as we're
yeah,
practicing
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. Now, I don't know how it works with woodwind. I know with string instrument, we have something called sympathetic ringing, where certain notes which
Yeah.
are octave for the fourth string, they will ring. Okay, and if you can hear the ringing, that helps. Sometimes in the lower note, the ringing is also has to come with a strong vibration. That helps also. But you can also teach finger patterns. So I think if you are doing woodwinds, there are probably certain ways to blow so that it's in tune. It's not just a matter of pressing a key, right? There are certain ways to blow so that it's in tune, right? Okay, so yeah, and sometimes you might just have to use the visual tuners to explain what intonation is. It took me
Mhm.
a long time to understand the whole concept of intonation. And sometimes I think if I'm sitting in the viola section, I might play in tune with my section. That's like the most common. Yeah. So you're thinking, am I playing in tune with my section? How loud does my section have to be so I can tell that I'm playing in tune? So these are what I call the acoustical consideration I need to make.
Mhm. Yeah, so just maybe like extra guidance on like more than you would want the student to kind of do like gain on their own, like extra
Yes.
guidance.
Help them develop the kinesthetic ability of
Yeah,
what they need to do
yeah,
to breathe the weight in order to create the sound that's into.
yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah.
helpful. That's helpful. And the verbal instruction while students are playing, that's a very string teacher thing. I don't know how many of my woodwind colleagues like because when when I first started rehearsing with strings like in chamber music and stuff like that, it always used to be so funny to me that they would ask me questions in the middle of playing. And they'd be like, "Did you not hear my question?" I'm like, "I got an instrument in my mouth. I can't answer you."
Yeah, you're
That's
right.
like a
It's
little
more or less a string
microculture
thing.
thing.
Yeah, it's practical. Yeah, that
Um,
makes sense. Okay.
so the second, you already mentioned this, that the second section of this book and the rather larger section of this book is comprised of those first person accounts of their own experiences that you guys went ahead and decided to include those so that people could see that there's lots of, because everybody's different, everybody's story is different. There's lots of ways to approach um, being a musician, but also having a hearing loss. So my question then is, how did you go about collecting all of those stories?
Well, we already had a Facebook group going on, like when we did started asking for stories.
For the first
And
edition.
so for the first edition,
Okay.
yeah. So we did that. So that's where we got most of the stories from. Yeah.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So which I'm getting ahead of myself. You are also in leadership for the Association of Adult Musicians with Hearing Loss. Which came
Hmm.
first, that Facebook group, or was it actually the organization?
Our organization was founded in 2001, and it was then incorporated as a nonprofit in 2004. So the association came first before the Facebook group.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I did not start a Facebook group until either 2007 or 2009, one of those years. I can't
Okay.
remember which one, but
Yeah. And I personally had never heard of the AAMHL before I read this book this summer. So I imagine I'm not the only one. Tell us about what is the AAMHL?
it is our association is a nonprofit that attempt to support adult musicians who find themselves losing their hearing and need to determine how to integrate the role of music in their hearing journey. But we also support individuals who, after receiving cochlear implant, discover music and decide they want to learn to play an instrument. So in the past, we've had posted online seminars and online concerts. We also meet in person. We have an upcoming meetup in Denver, Colorado this October. So yeah, so even though we're mostly a virtual group, I try to create events that help to bring people together. So, we can meet others, even virtually or even in person. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And so, yeah. So I think we try to meet people who love music in their hearing journey. Let's put it that way. Okay. Doesn't
So,
matter whether it's a child or an adult, whether they lose the hearing as a child or as an adult.
okay.
Although I would say our focus is mostly on adults,
Okay.
mostly because I feel like there's enough support in the public schools for kids who want to learn music, and there's not a whole lot of support for adults who are losing their hearing. That's my opinion,
Yeah. And
especially if you're a musician.
yeah, and especially when it's gone through, a portion of a musical career and now finds themselves in a different, and now find themselves in a
Yes,
different situation
yes,
and trying to figure
yes.
out how to deal. Yeah. So what might prompt a musician to look into joining the
Yeah. Well,
association?
I think musicians who lose their hearing later in life, they often find there's no one near them who could relate to their sense of growing isolation and frustration, or maybe frustration, or denial, or depression. By participating in our Facebook group, at least they can find other musicians facing the same issues or talk over issues of mutual interest. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool. So you provide support as in like resources like research to read or as in like maybe a bank of recommended doctors? Like what sorts of support do you
Well,
provide?
I think what we do is one thing we might do is to create a toolkit. Like this, you're losing your hearing now. Who do you talk to?
Yeah.
And so some of the questions we get are like, where am I going to find an audiologist that can help me with my hearing problem? Who can program my hearing aid? That's like one of the most common questions. Or which hearing aid is the best hearing aid for music performance? These are the kind of questions I get asked a
Yeah.
lot. So yeah, so I think in terms of resources, well, we have a website, but that website is in the process of being revised. So I'm not really about to, let's see, I can just, I'm going to drop a link into the chat box
Okay.
so people can go to the current website and, okay. So I think they can try that but there are a lot of links there that need to be repaired because everything is being transferred to our new website. So
Yeah.
eventually that link will go to the new website. But right now the link has information about the music. We provide resources like here's the frequency tables that corresponds to musical notes. You'll need to take that with you to the audiologist's office because most audiologists are not trained in musical acoustics. So
Right.
so if they think in frequency, you think in terms of musical note, you have to tell them the specific frequency. That's one way to get started. Don't just tell them which note you have trouble hearing. That's not usually not going to mean anything unless they are trained musicians.
Yeah.
So that's one thing we talk about. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's one thing that's on our website. But but I also think we have we have listed organizations that help that are we have listed website for musicians themselves because some musicians have their own website. Musicians with hearing loss, some of them have website for their own. Yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
so then, but we also list website of musicians that are not in our group. I mean, Evelyn Lenny, for example, or there's a K-pop group called Big Ocean. You know, it's comprised of singers and rappers who have hearing loss. So we try to highlight things of interest and links for the group. But
Yeah.
I'm beginning to think we might want to have a toolkit just for musicians who are new to hearing loss.
Yeah.
Something to consider.
Well, and in the meantime, it sounds like while your site is kind of going under some reconstruction, in the meantime, maybe your book is like a
Yeah,
really
the
good
book is like
a primer.
it's a good primer.
Yeah.
It
Uh,
really is.
I thought it was too. There were things that I did not know about hearing loss, that once I read through there, I was like, oh, that is not, I mean, without having to deal with it myself, that how would I know? And so if I were a musician that now is getting a diagnosis of, yeah, you've got some substantially damaged hearing, well, now I can turn to something to just get me started on it. And I think that this book does a good job of that. So for those of us that don't have a hearing loss, what do you want us to know?
So regardless of whether you are a professional amateur musician, I think it's important that all musicians take good care of their hearing. Don't just accept the premise that hearing loss is an occupational hazard of being a musician, and there's nothing that can be done about that. I would suggest that all musicians need to take ownership of their hearing health. Please develop a relationship with the audiologist in the same way you would develop a relationship with a person who helps you to maintain or repair your instrument.
Oh,
Musicians are at higher risk for developing hearing loss, so seeing an audiologist at least once a year. First to see is the first thing to do is to establish a baseline of where your hearing is, and then in subsequent sessions see if the hearing is decreasing or not. You know, in our book we have one whole chapter that talks about custom-made earplugs. That's a good tool to protect your hearing.
hmm. Yeah, even the inexpensive ones are a good tool. Particularly, I'm looking at you, all you band directors out there that are standing in front of classes and classes of kids playing directly at you in an enclosed room every day. We'll get to you later this semester. Okay, so what is what is something that you want musicians with hearing loss to know?
I think I want them to know that you're not alone. Learn all you can about hearing devices and look for an audiologist who is knowledgeable about programming hearing aids for musical performance. Join our Facebook groups so you can learn more and have the opportunity to meet other musicians who are on the same journey. I'm going to drop the link to the Facebook group to the chat box. Give me 1 minute.
I really do appreciate you taking some time. I know that your schedule is quite busy. Are you playing still? You're playing like this season.
Well, I'm taking viola lessons. I am also in a intermediate level string orchestra in my area. So I'm not a professional, not yet. I don't have time, but I am in a community orchestra of sorts. So that helps to increase my ensemble skills, which I think is valuable to have.
Yeah.
And I'm very fortunate. I found a group where I can put my remote microphone, give one to the conductor and give one to my stand partner or the people in my section so I can stay together. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a nice thing, about that's a nice thing when everything works out the way you want it to work out.
Do you have anything? Do you know what you're playing already for the first part of the season? Do you have any pieces coming up that you're just like, oh, I'm looking forward to playing that?
Well, we did. So I live outside of Raleigh, North Carolina, and we recently played for the town of Cary, did an environmental symposium, and I shouldn't have got. I can't help it when I get excited learning something about the work I've loved to hear. So, for example, I always like the Swan Lake Overture, the Overture to Swan Lake by Tchaikovsky. Well, we violists don't get a whole lot of the melody. But it was very happy. I was happy to say, oh, I'm learning a piece. I've always enjoyed listening. It's just kind of that thrill. But I think I'm a classical musician at heart. So it was fun to learn that piece. It was fun to learn how Vivaldi's Summer, most of the work we do are arrangement of some of famous works. So
Mhm.
it's a good starting point for me, and we
Mhm.
did that. So this fall, I think we're going to be doing the overture from the Handel Messiah, and I'm not sure what else, but anyway, I am progressing musically.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like fun stuff to play. And yes, we love the inner voices. We love the what we call the middle voices, the inner voices in the orchestra. So we appreciate you over in the viola section. Hey, where can musicians find your book and where can they
Okay.
find out if AAMHL is right for them?
Well, I think they can join the Facebook group and just, listen to our discussion because people do write in all sorts of questions and interesting questions. So, if you want the link to the book, let me drop that into the chat too. And it shouldn't be that hard. Let's see. It's a long. It's How do you find this book? Did it come across in a Google search or how
It
do you
did.
find the book?
I was looking for, I started off looking for scholarly papers on musicians and hearing loss. And then in one of those scholarly papers, it referenced your book, and I was like, "What book is that?" And so then I went and searched for it, and I was like, "There's a whole book on this topic."
Yes.
But yeah, it seems like I'm not the only one that found that it was a good resource.
I'm glad. I'm glad you found it a good resource, and thank you so much for publicizing it. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
it's a more common it's a more common issue, right? Particularly the older we get, the more likely it becomes. And I have a feeling that in our own general membership, there's a fair number of musicians, of clarinetists who are slowly, maybe even they don't quite realize it, losing their hearing. And so to have something like this, when you come to that realization of, oh, I'm really missing a chunk of that ability that I had, um, it's really nice to have something that, like I said, is not just very practical. It gives you a very good overview, but all of the stories of people, yeah, they were very diverse, and they were
Yes,
very
exactly.
uplifting. Yeah.
Hmm.
I appreciate that this book makes it clear that if you are a musician and you are losing your hearing, that doesn't mean that you have to lose all hope of playing your instrument.
Hmm.
So
Correct.
I really thank you for that. That's going to be really helpful for a lot of people, I think.
Yeah.
So,
I actually like to tell the story of my friend. She she plays double bass, and she was playing double bass with the Rochester Philharmonic when she started losing her hearing, and she ended up. She still teaches, I believe, and she's done some work with regard to writing pedagogy books for the double bass.
mhm.
But she also went for a career change and is focused on music and the arts at uh, the Eastman Conservatory of Music. I think it's
Okay.
in Rochester. So yeah, her name is Galen McCormick. I look at her and I think, now that's an example of how you move on and incorporate hearing loss in your life. Okay, so but yeah, but I think when it comes to adult, people have different ways of trying to figure out how to cope or working through something like this. So sometimes it takes time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Wendy, thank you very much for again taking the time for talking us through um, some of your thoughts on your book and just surrounding the organization that you have founded. And we'll make sure that those links show up in the notes or in the description when we publish. But really appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Can you send me the link when you publish? Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Bye bye.